Good evening, YouTube. My name is Rich. Welcome to my shop. This is my first YouTube video, so I hope you'll bear with me. Tonight's project is going to be making some new T-nuts for the closing milling machine. The nuts that I have from my old Chinese RF45 are a little too large. So I got a sample part here that's pretty close to what I need it to be. I got my mystery meat, and the mystery steel here measures about 880 by 625, which I think will be just about right. My slots are about 890 by 680. So I think that'll work just fine. So we're going to be making these tonight over on the Atlas horizontal milling machine. So let's go over there and get started. Okay, so to make this part, what we're going to do is we're going to mill 2 slots down the side of this piece, and those slots are going to be about 315 deep or so. So that's going to be our target. I've got the milling machine set up with a 1-inch arbor, a pair of cutters with a 1/2-inch spacer in between here, and the width of the T-slot here at the top is just a little over 1/2 inch, so I think that'll be just about perfect. All right. So the first thing we'll do is put the piece in the vise, and we'll get started. So I've got a couple parallels in here. Just give those a quick wipe, make sure they're pretty clean. And we will set this up. Alright, tap, and that looks good. Alright, so now we're going to make sure that all the knees unlocked here. Move the table down, come over a little bit, and we'll just get close. And the depth here, that looks pretty good. Just give it a spin, make sure it's all free, and then the first thing I'm going to do, well, actually, let me get this pretty close to being centered up here. That looks pretty good. And then we're just going to bring the knee up when we just start to touch. All right, that looks pretty good. So we'll lock the knee. Feet out here. And then we're going to set that, call that 0. So the next thing I need to do is I need to center up my cutter, or center up the work rather in the cutters. And I think I'm just going to do this by eye. I don't think this doesn't need to be close to the nearest 1/1030 thing. It's just a T-nut. So I'm just going to eyeball this and get it pretty close to center. And I think that probably looks pretty good right there. Actually, I'm going to grab a 1/2-inch parallel, I think, and pop it in between. That to be a little bit easier to see. So let me go find one, and I'll be right back. So what I'm going to do is I put a parallel here between the 2 cutters here, and that's a 1/2-inch spacer in between there, so that should be pretty close. And the thing I'm going to do is just take my trusty calipers here, and I'm just going to measure both sides. See how close I can get. All right, so it's going to come back to me a little bit. Oh, wrong way. All right, that looks pretty darn close. So we'll go ahead and lock the table. And then we're going to make sure we're clear here on the cutter. Parallel out, so it doesn't go flying across the shop. And then we're going to crank up, what did I say here? About 300 and And we're going to call that 330 thousandths. All right. So we got 100, 200, 10, 20, 30. All right. Lock it off. Make sure we're clear. Fire it up. Cutting oil. There we go. So I'm going to be conventional milling this. Fine milling on the Atlas milling machine is a terrible idea, so we're not going to do it. So here we go. This is cutting really nicely. A little noisy, but it's making a nice smooth cut. Chips look good. I'm feeding this by hand for a couple of reasons. One is I'm really just getting familiar with this machine. I've only had it since the beginning of winter, and obviously I didn't spend much time working on it here in New York this winter in my unheated shop. And the other reason is because you might be able to see over here my power feed is broken. It needs a couple of new bevel gears. So we're just going to go by hand, take it nice and slow, and we'll cut the length of the part. So I'm going to come back when we're almost done. There may be a bit of vibration on this. My shop is located here upstairs in my 110-year-old barn, and the floor is not the most rock-solid floor ever. It does vibrate a bit when the machines are running when you walk around, but we'll see how it comes out. I may edit this part out if it's really much too shaky. See, even though this is a little tiny machine, it only weighs about 350 pounds or so, you can hog off some serious metal in this thing in a big hurry. And I'll come over to the side here when we get closer to being done, and you can see the finish on this is just absolutely perfect. Well, we're getting pretty close to the end here. I've actually started feeding a little bit faster halfway through. Metal's coming off just beautifully. Chips are flying on the floor. Maybe a wider chip pan might be a good idea for this machine, but that'll have to come in good time. Alright, so that's our part. Let's move these chips out of the way. Now, of course, I got lucky. I neglected to check my travel here. I'm just about at the end of my table travel with about, maybe an inch to spare or so. So you can see these cutters are pretty hot. These are brand new cutters, never been used before, so they're nice and sharp. And I got a big old pile of chips here. So I'm going to take this out, do a little deburring. Let me actually come in real close if I can here and see if you can see the finish on this. Are you going to focus? Well, I don't know if we're going to focus on that, but when we get done, I'll take another shot at it. The finish is really just like beautifully smooth here. Feels like a piece of glass. Okay, so the part's deburred. And as I was doing that, I was reminded that I forgot to include an important disclaimer at the beginning of the video, and that is, I'm not a very good machinist. I'm fairly proficient on the lathe, but everything else I'm still definitely very much learning. I thought I had the vise pretty well trammed up, and when I took the part out and looked at it, it became abundantly clear that I am way out of trim. I don't know if you can see that, but God, I'm probably 30 thousandths out here at the end of the cut. So the good news is the start of the cut is pretty good. I'm about 10 thousandths off center here, which is more than good enough for the T-nut here. I am a little bit shallow on my shoulder here. It just barely starts to go in there, but not quite. So we'll take care of that. I'll take another 20 thousandths off or so. And I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and trim the vise up, and I'm going to end up probably a little bit skinny on this side, but I think I'll still be fine. My sample's on the other bench here, but I think I've got plenty of meat here to punch a hole in there and get a bolt in there. So good enough, I think. You know, it's just a T-nut. It's not rocket surgery. So let's go ahead back to the mill, and we will trim the vise up and see if we can't salvage this part. Okay, so I have my plunge back dial indicator set up here in the vise. I've got a little bit of pressure on it. I'm off on the far corner of the vise here, and I'm set on 0. So I've got this nut fairly loose, and this one just loosened up a little bit, so I should be able to swivel this off. So let's go ahead and we're going to run the width of the vise, and let's see where we end up here. All right, so we're going to be off about, I don't know, 7 or 8 thousandths, I guess, once we get to the end here. Yeah, just about 7 thousandths. So we'll go ahead. So I'm 7 thousandths low on that side, so we'll go ahead and maybe try to get it about halfway there. And I guess the whole vise must be moving here. That looks maybe worse. Let's see what that does. Let's go ahead and bring it back to 0. And we'll traverse back the other way. All right, well that's worse. All right, let's just keep going. I have a feeling I'm just sort of sliding in the slot here. Let's see if I can. I'm just sort of pulling this by hand, trying to make sure it swivels. All right, let's re-zero. And let's traverse back and see where we're at. All right, that looks pretty close. Let's make sure I got enough pressure on the vise that I'm not just off. So we'll go ahead and bring it back. I'm just bowing the table back a little bit here. All right, let's run her back. All right, that looks pretty good. Well, maybe a thou out. Let's just center that up. Come on. And run her back one more time. All right, we're off by maybe a thou or so. Thou or so low. All right, let's see. All right, that looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and snug her down, and then we'll do one more quick pass to make sure it doesn't move when I snug it down, and we'll try to rescue that part. Helps if you use the right side of the wrench. All right. And let's see how we did. Well, did it move? Or did I just bump the indicator? All right, that looks pretty close. I would say that's probably within about a thou across the width of that vise. So we're going to call that good. Let's go ahead and reset up the part and see if we can't get it rescued. Okay, so the part's back in. I went ahead and adjusted the table back to where it was again, so I'm centered up on the cutters here, on the end of the cut here. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm clear, unlock the knee. I'm going to dial in about, I guess, I'm going to take 25 thousandths to make sure I got enough clearance. I don't want those to be too tight in the slot, all right? So let's see. 10, there's 20, there's 5. Lock the table. Get a little cutting oil. And let's see how we do. Here we go. I'm a little concerned this is going to try to follow this cut and actually pull the vise out of tram again. I got it locked down pretty tight, so we'll see how it does. It does look like it's shooting off quite a few more chips on the backside there than on the front, which is an encouraging sign. And just looking at the cut, it looks like it's pretty even now on both sides. So we're going to finish this up and let's see how we did. All right, I'm going to bring the camera around and we'll have a look at that part. All right, so let's pull the part out, have a look. So visually that looks like it's pretty darn close to being straight. Certainly quite a bit better than it was, and I think that's probably going to be just fine. So the next thing to do is bring it over to the closing, and we'll make sure that it has a good fit. Actually, first, the next thing to do is to deburr it again real quick. Edges are still a little bit sharp, but not bad. I don't know if you can see the finish on that, but it's actually pretty nice. This machine, again, for a lightweight machine, really does a nice job. So let's bring it over to the other mill and give it a quick test fit. And then assuming that it all goes well, then we'll go ahead and start chopping this into pieces about, I would say maybe about 1 inch long or so. All right, let's see how we did. All right, so I knocked all the sharp edges off with a file. Let's see how we did. Yeah, it's a little snug. That's interesting. Fits great that way. A little snug going the other way. So I don't know, maybe these slots aren't perfectly even. I know my T-nut is not perfectly even. Yeah, it's definitely stiff going that direction. Let's try the other slot. This slot's actually a little dirty, but stiff going that way. Better, but still stiff going that way. So I think, I don't know, I think I'm okay on my height. I didn't really say. I guess I could get some bluing and see where it's binding up. Maybe I just have a burr on the end. The end of this bar is not exactly perfect. I think what I'm going to do is, what am I going to do? I think I'm going to go ahead and just maybe take the sides of these, take all the surfaces maybe, and just run them across with some 120 grit sandpaper just to make sure that they're nice and smooth. I'm not missing a burr or something. And let's see if I can get it to fit. It's actually still, it's still a little bit off. I can see it here down at the bottom. I'm still quite a bit wider on this side than the other side. So I don't know, maybe my vise is not well trained up as well as I thought it was. Maybe what I'll do is maybe I'm going to mount this in the vise in the other direction and take a pass and see what happens. Maybe I'll go 10 thousandths deeper. Let's see what that does. You know, again, it's just a T-nut, so I'm not looking for perfection. I'm just looking for something that works. Let's give it a shot. All right. So I got the piece mounted end over end. We're going to see what happens. It's important to note that you shouldn't really think of this video as a how-to video. It's really more of a how-not-to video. So this will be good. If you do what I do, and you avoid doing what I'm doing, you'll end up with working parts. All right, so we're definitely taking some chips off. I did dial in another 15 thousandths on the table, so I'm going to take this and make that shoulder just a tiny bit deeper. And if I look at it on the end, it looks like I'm taking just a bit more off the back than I am off the front. So hopefully this is going to even my slot out, and let's see how it fits. Okay, so I took a file, I knocked off all the burrs, I worked on all the edges a little bit just to make sure that they were nice and eased a bit. I worked on the ends of the bar a little bit because they were a little bit, you can see this one's been beaten out a little bit on the end there. And, well, let's see. Oh, that's much better. I like that. Beautiful. Just enough play that it'll be easy to get those in and out. Okay, so the next thing to do is to figure out how long I'm going to make these. I'm going to make them probably about an inch, but I'm going to go ahead and mark this out and see if I can get one extra one, or if I'm going to end up with just a little nub, I may make them just a bit shorter than that. So I'm going to grab my sample piece to start with, and we'll go ahead and see what we come up with. Okay, so my bar is about 8 3/4 long. About a ½ an inch on this end is no good, so I'm just going to go ahead and make 8 1-inch T-nuts out of here. First thing I want to do is just maybe clean this edge off a little bit, so I'm just going to face that off real quick here in the milling machine. Tighten that up real good. Give her a whack. And then we'll bring the table up. And we'll take a cut. I think my next project is going to be an adapter to put an electric drill on this knee elevation. I've had this mill for just a few months. I've only really been using it for a few weeks, and I'm already getting pretty tired of cranking it up and down, so I think that'll be a nice improvement. All right, we're almost there. Don't drop your calipers. All right, we've got about a 50 thousandths cut dialed in there. I'm going to go ahead and lock the knee, lock the tables, drop the cutting oil on there, and I am set for 1,000 RPM, so good. Let's see how we do. I guess I don't want to lock the pretty good finish. These nice little needle-like chips. I'll be finding those in the house for about a week or so. All right, so I think we're ready to go ahead over to the bandsaw and start chopping this up. Actually, I think I'm going to go to plan B. I think I'm going to drill my holes first, and then I'm going to put it in the bandsaw. So let's go ahead and get set up for that. Okay, so these aren't space shuttle parts. We're just going to go ahead and lay these out by hand. So I got a scriber, I got a square, I got my trusty calipers. By the way, if you're a terrible machinist like me, I would highly recommend investing in a pair of decent digital calipers. These are Mitutoyos. I think I paid about $50 for these on eBay, and they're really a pleasure to use. They're tremendously accurate. People complain that calipers are not as good as micrometers. I don't know, unless you're working to a tenth. I think if you're careful, you can actually get great measurements. I periodically check these against a micrometer, and I find that for the work I do, I'm almost always within 1/1000th or even a bit less. So, real handy tool. So I got these set for 1/2 inch. I'm going to go ahead and start on the end here, and I put some bluing on there, and I'm just going to go ahead and scribe a line. And then I'm going to grab my scale, and I'm just going to go ahead and mark off every inch from there. All right. You're still in the frame. Can you see this at all? I guess I'm pretty close. Let me turn this a little bit. All right, so there's one. All right. Oop. All right, we're all marked off. I'm going to go ahead and put these tools away. So the hold downs I'm going to use, or the bolts rather, are these. They're 18 threads per inch. Got my tap drill size. Got my tap. I'm going to go ahead and chuck up a center drill. And we're going to get started dropping everything on the floor, drilling and tapping the holes. Okay, so the machinery's handbook says for 5/16 drill and steel is about 1200 RPM. My choices for speeds on this milling machine are 1000 or 1900. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these at 1000 RPM, use a little cutting fluid, and we're going to start with a center drill, then we'll switch to our 17/64 tap drill size, and I'll run the tap in. All right, everything's locked down tight. Here we go. And then I got to come down a little bit on the table. There we go. A little more. This is a nicely made machine, but unfortunately the work envelope is a little bit constricting. There's only about 3 inches of travel in the quill. So you do end up cranking the table up and down a bit more than you like, I think, but it does nice work otherwise. All right. Oil on there. There, we gotta have enough to run the tap down. We gotta move the table back up again. I think I'll be all right. I'm just gonna lightly snug that. Start the machine up. Let's try that again. A little tighter this time. All right, I think that started pretty good. Should have room to get my tap wrench in there, and we'll go ahead and tap that out. Using a nice sharp brand new tap. You know, I don't get to spend as much time in my shop as I wish I could. So one of the things I make sure that I always do is have nice sharp tools, because there's nothing worse than wasting time fighting with a dull tool. And you know what, I'm going to grab a countersink real quick and just ease the edge on that guy. All right. All right, of course we don't reach, so back up we go. And we'll just go. All right. Check our fit. Perfect. All right, 8 more to go. All right, last hole. So, how many of you, when I was laying out these lines, were screaming at your computer screen going, "Hey dumbass, you're on the milling machine, why don't you just go ahead and use the dials and move over an inch that way?" Which is a great idea. So that's what I've done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1 inch. Much easier. Alright, put a little countersink on there. I'm going to have arms like Popeye from cranking this table up and down pretty soon. Alright, and then we'll tap that last hole. And then it's off to the bandsaw. Split these up, clean up the ends a little bit, and we are done. Going to use a little bit of the old anchor lube on this. I think it works pretty good for tapping, although I noticed if you're tapping under power, it has a tendency to kind of fly off in all directions, but all right. I went ahead and made myself a little spill-proof or semi-spill-proof oil cup because I knocked this off the table about twice an hour. I save a lot of money on cutting oil that way. Although it does seem that about half the time it lands completely upside down on its top and a bunch of oil does spill out, but it's certainly an improvement over what I had before. I don't know what kind of steel this is, but it's surprisingly tough. It's kind of been fighting me every step of the way here. And we are just about through. And that is it. All right, we'll take this out of the vise and go to the bandsaw. Okay, so I went and clamped a stop to the table. Made sure it was square, and then this blade is just about 1 inch, and I just ran it up and made sure that the corner of the square is just about centered in the kerf of the blade. It's going to be not within 1/10 or anything, but I think it'll be pretty close. And hopefully my bandsaw is plugged in. And what we're going to do is run the work up against the stop. And our first piece. All right, well there it is, one down. Take a file to that, clean up the corners, cut the rest off, and we are done. All right, there's the finished product. Took the file, knocked down all the corners, rounded them off a little bit. And that's it. They're nice and snug. Just enough play. They move nice and smoothly back in the slots. So 8 T-nuts done. So we had some fun in the shop. We had a few mishaps, and hope you enjoyed watching tonight's episode of Making T-nuts the Hard Way. Thanks for watching.